today, did you? Sorry, just being a bit goofy. My camera's a bit wonky. Is that okay? I don't know. I think I'm a bit slanted. I'm a little bit reluctant to go messing with my tripods because I snapped one the other day. Anyway, let's have a little introduction. If you're one of my regular viewers, a subscriber of my channel, you're probably here because of the weekly vlog. And we've just come off the back of Vlogtober, and I asked a question a couple of times. I mentioned it in the Vlogtober series, and the general consensus was it seemed a good idea to actually have a little, I want to say standalone video every Wednesday, but I'll talk about that in a while. So that's what I'm here. That's why I'm here, because you know I raised a question in Vlogtober, and a few of you, maybe just one of you, said that you would like it, and I was like, oh, I'll run with that. And if it's the first time that you've stopped by my channel, so yes, my name is Dawn. I'm originally from Manchester, which is the northwest of England, and for over 20 years I have been living in the Netherlands, and I live here with my partner Lawrence, who's from South Africa, our sons Josh and William, and our little doggy, our little Parsons Terrier Jack. So and then I'm sat in my craft room. I'm a bit of a craftaholic. So yeah, as I said, this is coming off a question I asked in Vlogtober. So, and I was humming and hawing. I wanted to do it on Wednesday because that seemed like a nice midpoint, you know, halfway through the week kind of thing, even though we've got 7 days in a week. But anyway, and then I was like, well, I have to call it something because I don't want people to be confused with like the weekly vlog. And you know, I've just done Vlogtober, and I probably will be doing Vlogmas, touch wood. And then I was like, should I call it like chats from the craft room? But then I'm kind of limiting myself that I can only do my chats in my craft room. And maybe I've been talking about something in the weekly vlog, and I feel that I didn't quite finish what I was saying, or it deserves a little bit more in-depth conversation. And I'm very mindful that I don't want my weekly vlogs to go much over an hour because you know, we're all busy. And you know, there's a ton of other YouTube videos that you need to catch up on. So I think up to now we're going to call it Wednesday, Chit Chat Wednesdays. There you go, Chit Chat Wednesdays. That's what we're going to call it. I'll probably forget that now, but anyway. And I'm sat up here because I'm going to do some knitting with you. I was thinking, well, I'm going to do a bit of knitting. I finished all my chores of the morning. But as I said, these chit chats are meant to be kind of as more of a standalone to the weekly vlog. So you're not going to get me waffling about the same stuff, you know, just sat in a different, you know, in my car or in my kitchen. You know, it's meant to, you know, stand on its own, that you can just dive in and, you know, listen to a little kind of, you know, a story or my opinion on something, or, you know, maybe we'll do a Q&A. If I've got enough to waffle about, then it'll be every Wednesday. We'll see how it goes. Right, I hope you're all cozy down. I don't know how long I'm going to waffle for, but I've decided I'm not going to feel rushed. So if it's only 20 minutes, it is. And if it's over an hour, it is. So, and you know, I'm not in charge of when you know, how you spend your time. So if you're too busy or you watch me in several parts, that's your business, not mine. I've made myself a cup of tea. I'm trying to get better at drinking tea. This is Clipper, and it's Happy Monday, it's called, even though we're not on Monday, it's Wednesday. Right, I'm gonna get my out of my beautiful new knitting bag gifted to me. It was my birthday in October, and my lovely friend Jeanette, who's also here on YouTube, gifted me this amazing knitting bag. But yeah, I've spoken about that already. It's not part of today's chit chat, but I am knitting. If you watch my vlogs and all the rest of it, you'll know I've been knitting a sweater. It's called the Ranunculus sweater by somebody called Midori, somebody or other, I forget her name. But anyway, I thought I'm making great guns. If you're not a knitter, I'm not going to talk about knitting now, but I'm just showing you what I'm doing, because you won't see it. I'll be kind of looking down. So just so you know, I'm knitting this sweater and it's called the ranunculus sweater, and these cables are here because you knit the arms later. So I've just put the little knit stitches on this cable so they don't drop off, and now I'm knitting, it's upside down, I'm knitting the torso. That's what I'm doing. Right, I've explained that. Actually, I don't need my knitting bag here because I don't trust myself near my cup of tea. I'd be gutted if I spilt tea on it and I'd not had it a month. Hopefully I've got enough wool. Right, so I thought today's topic will be how I moved to the Netherlands, or why I moved to the Netherlands, because that is a reoccurring question. And also some of you have asked, you know, many times how I met Lawrence, and I have touched upon it but not had like a proper chat about it. So hope you knuckle down, and I'm going to talk about some stuff, and you know, some things I have to respect people's privacy and so forth. So, you know, excuse me if I might skim over things or dig a bit deeper on other things. I think my tea's really, really hot. Yes, I won't be drinking that yet. So, shall we begin? Or have you paused me and gone off to, I don't know, get some knitting, or, you know, maybe you think, oh, I need to mop the kitchen floor, I'll stick her on, or make a nice drink. I'm just thinking, do I need my yeah, do you know what? I don't want to risk dropping a stitch because that would just be disastrous. It would just be me panicking on camera. Right, so as I mentioned earlier, I've lived in the Netherlands for 24 years now. Yeah, actually at the beginning of October it would have been 24 years. And with my job that I was doing when I lived in the UK still, they had the company. I worked in the marketing department, and they had we'd had like a company split, you know, and you know how these things work, and jobs had been reshuffled, and you know, etc. And then one of the things that came out of it was I had a lot of colleagues all around Europe and the US and other regions, but you know, we kind of did our own thing and just plugged in, you know, to the hierarchy, you know, at some point. And all the marketing colleagues of mine who did the same role as me lived all over Europe. We were quite big at one point. And then we got a new manager, and it was very clear that the strategy was that they wanted to centralise the marketing team. So bring everybody over to the Netherlands to I think it was the European, it wasn't manufacturing it. We were some kind of HQ for something, I forget now. Sorry, I'm going back over 24 years. So anyway, I had a good working relationship with my manager, and you know, he was really good, and he bought me time, and I said, well, you know, I don't think I'm ready for it, and I'd always had a hankering to move here, but kind of treat it as like a stepping stone, because some of my friends had actually used this as a stepping stone and gone off and worked in America, which is kind of what I would have liked to have done. But I was in a relationship, you know, we'd bought a house, and you know, I was actually married at that point. But as I said, I'm not that person. It's not about that person, and I don't have anything bad to say about them. But well, anyway, the story will progress. So, you know, as that goes, I had commitments, you know. I mean, okay, no children or anything like that, but still. And then over the course of, you know, 12 months or maybe a bit longer, whilst all this, you know, some colleagues moved over, some, you know, looked for other jobs, and, you know, it was all done quite nice. And at that point I was thinking, well, I've kind of got a year, you know, to, you know, look for a new job, figure out where I want to go to, etc. And then during that point, you know, the relationship just wasn't, you know, it just wasn't working out anymore. You know, no other parties involved, you know, I don't have anything bad to say about it. All I will say is, you know, 22 years getting married is way too young. And all my friends were doing it at the time. It was like a hype thing, and none of us are still married to those people anymore. So there you go. That's the story. So yeah, you know, whilst my relationship was breaking down, and then I ended up moving in with, well, no, then I told my boss, you know what, listen, I'm just going to take the plunge. What's the worst that can happen? I'm going to move it over. I need somewhere to live anyway. And, you know, if it doesn't work out, I'll just come back and find another job. So as you can imagine, my boss and all my colleagues were thrilled. So, yeah, plans were afoot. Now, during this time, I had moved in with my friend Michelle, who many of you, if you watch the vlog or from my old channel, you'll know Michelle has been my best friend since we were, I was 7 and she was 6, went through primary school together and all the rest. And Michelle is half Maltese, and I don't even know, for many years she's been living, it's got to be over 15 years. She actually lives in Malta. But at the time, when me and Michelle, we had, you know, I'm not just saying, even though it was a very sad period, you know, because, you know, you just kind of mourn, you know, a friendship, you know, that you no longer had anymore. And I don't have any contact with that person, but I understand that they're very, very happy. So, you know, I think it was a good decision all round. I mainly led that decision, but there was a lot of circumstances. And as I said, you know, just babies, you know, you just want different things in life. Anyway, I said I'm not going to dwell on that because that's, you know, that's about somebody else's private life, not just mine. Anyway, so Michelle, the internet was still quite a new thing then. And Michelle was quite modern, and she had, you know, internet in her house. And she'd joined this chat room, and she was talking to like friends and family in Malta, and, you know, family in the south of England, all over. And you know, like all good friends do, I called her a weirdo, and, you know, you don't even know if these people are real. Anyway, Michelle kind of got me to join in, and actually, so just to put some context on it, chat rooms. This was around the early MSN days, so they weren't dating sites or like Tinder, those kind of things. You know, there was many like nice like digital pen pals formed at that point. So, you know, Michelle was on there to talk to her friends and family, and then she wrote me into it. We had a right laugh. Honestly, we used to have she might have even met a few people, you know, I don't know, but it's I think that died to death. It's no longer there. Anyway, so this one evening, somebody came online, you don't know if they're a man, woman, where they live, whatever, and asked me if I sent me a private message. You could do like a DM then, and you know, oh, do you live in Sweden? And I was like, no. And I, you know, wasn't in the habit of talking to strangers, because, you know, early days of internet, you're highly suspicious, and anybody using the internet in my books was just a complete weirdo. And so this person was trying to engage with me, chat, not flirty, not hitting on me, nothing. I didn't know if it was a man or a woman. And then you know, I gave a little bit away. I said, no, I'm in the UK, and they said, I said, why, are you Swedish? You know, it was like an instant, you know, why are you asking me that? And then they said, no, I'm not, but I lived there. I used to live there. So I was like, oh, okay. And then they said, oh, no, but I live in the Netherlands now. So I was like, and I didn't know people who lived in the Netherlands. I knew, I had a couple of friends, but they were my colleagues, and then I knew colleagues, and that was it. I kind of had a little bit of a life there. And then I was like, that's my friend Marjorie. So you've never met her on the vlogs. Marjorie she's Dutch, but she now lives in Singapore for many, many years. But at the time, Marjorie was living here. And actually, she'll come back into the story in a while. I'd told Marjorie about this chat room, and I'd said to her, why don't you join it, and then we can talk in the evenings? And she was like, you're such a weirdo. She had the same reaction as me. So this person is like, you know, trying to get chatty with me. And I was like, It's Marjorie, little witch, taking the mickey out of me. So this person asked me my name. I said, oh, hardly going to tell you that. And I said, yeah, anyway, I have to go. And then they said their name. And I was like, this was clearly a guy. But I was thinking, what a made up name. Because, you know, I'm not going to tell you, but Lawrence has got quite an unusual first and last name when you add them together. It's like, who makes up a name like that? You could have done a bit better than that. No, this is an English person, you know, thinking this. And then, and then this person, Lawrence, had also told me the company that he worked for. No, when I'm trying to get you right. When I thought it was Marjorie, when my antenna went off, I started sort of playing along with it. And then I said, well, where do you live in the Netherlands? Because my company is there and I go work there sometimes. Now, for 4 years, I was commuting back and forth to the Netherlands all the time. You imagine, you know, my team was there. Sometimes it was like, you know, every week, you know, in every month. It was a lot. And I'd said that I work, no, and then they said the company that they worked for, and that was the same company as me. And I was like, come on, Marjorie, you've got to do better than that. So then I said, well, that's strange because I work for that company. And then this is before I knew that it was Lawrence, the name Lawrence. And that person was like, no way. You know, where do you work for? And, you know, in the company, because it was massive, you know, we had divisions. So I gave a division that I knew had been sold to another company. And then they said, oh, so you're going to the new company then? Oh, wow. So, and then they said the name. Oh, yeah, mine's like Lawrence. And I was like, oh, my God, Marjorie, you're so lame. And so, right, well, I've got to go, bye. And left it at that. Anyway, then I go into the office. I don't know, however long, either the next day or the week. I don't know if it was the weekend. I genuinely don't remember. And then, sorry, this car just parked outside my house, but in the middle of the road. That's so weird. I need a swig. See, I'm waffling. And then so I'm still living in the UK, but by this point, I'm moving to the Netherlands. And I'd already got a trip planned to go and try and look at properties, you know, for renting, and it was happening. I think residency permits had been applied for. You know, it was all going ahead. The payroll system, they were moving me from the UK to the Netherlands, and you know, the shipping company been booked. I mean, I wasn't taking a lot, but I still, you know, I had more than a suitcase, and. So anyway, I go into work and I thought, and you know, with the time difference, I was like, yeah, she's got to be in work now. So I just quickly looked on the internal email system for the name that Lawrence had given me. And it was a real name. And I was like, huh? So I just emailed one line. That's all I said. Small world. That was it. And then my phone, we had phones on our desk. My phone rang straight away. It was Lawrence. And he didn't know until he got that email. He didn't know if I was a man or a woman either. But it was more, it wasn't about meeting somebody was the furthest thing from my mind. I'm moving to the Netherlands and I'm in my single year. You know, I'm going to live in Amsterdam and this is what I'm doing. This is like my path. So anyway, he called me and the whole conversation was bizarre. He knew one of my friends over there. I think they'd even had a little bit of a romantic dalliance, which hadn't gone anywhere. And he sat on the same floor as me. And I was like, oh my God, this is so bizarre. But our paths had never crossed, or had they? And so you remember I told you about the company had split. So it must have been like a year earlier. I'm sat at my desk minding my own business, and somebody from like the goods in, you know, like the I don't know what you call it, the warehouse. One of the guys came up and said, "Oh, you travel to the Netherlands a lot with your job," and you have to imagine it was still quite new, you know, like like I was only doing European traveling, but traveling, it was quite, a new thing back then. And I was like, yeah. And they said, oh, there's this guy come over from IT, and he's ordered some cables, and he doesn't know who to contact in the Netherlands, but they've not shown up. Do you know anybody who could help us in the Dutch office? And I remember the guy, we had these long rows. It was an open plan office. And so the guy from the warehouse was stood at my desk. So I leaned over and I was like, I don't know him. And then my colleague sat opposite me and she also leaned over. And then we looked at each other and went, like you do. And I was like, no. So I think I found some numbers and said, oh, you can try this person and da-da-da. And then he left. And then my colleague was like, do you know him? And I was like, no, I don't. And we were both like, in relationships at this point. But we both had that cheeky, like, he's quite nice, isn't he? They had this little cheeky, yeah. Didn't think anything more of it. And, I'd been travelling back and forth to the Netherlands, never laid eyes on this person, didn't think anything of it. Hope the guy got his cable. That was it. So fast forward to, I'm on this call with Lawrence. And then, we do work at the same company. We have mutual friends. And then he said, maybe I know you. So I said, oh, and he said, now at this point, digital cameras were really cutting edge. But because, the company that I worked for was a technology company, we had some digital cameras. So I did, unusually, I had a digital photo of myself. So he said, have you got a photo of yourself? Maybe I recognise you. So we literally exchanged photos by email. And he said, oh no, you don't look familiar. And my jaw dropped. Because it was the guy who was stood at the end of my desk where a year earlier. How would I remember it? Here's the weird thing. I said to him, you're going to think I'm a bit weird now, but have you got like a blue polo shirt? And he was like, and then he went, yeah, I have. And I was like, oh my God. And then I relayed the story. And he said he didn't remember me, but remembered the cables had gone missing. And I laughed and I said, oh yeah, me and my friend, we were checking you out. And we were laughing. And then I said, well, I'm going to be moving to the Netherlands. So, hey, one more friend. And then he said, yeah, let me know when you're next coming over. And, we're going to have a drink and, we'll get everybody together. And, that's how it progressed. So anyway, I'm busy dealing with, like starting the whole separation things and, who gets the house and, and I'm still living at Michelle's. And as I said, living at Michelle's was fun. I'd never done that, like girl experience, like room sharing. And she had a really nice house actually around the corner from me. And we had the best time ever. Luckily, her cousin, who is from Denmark, had moved in for a period at the tail end of me moving out, because I was also really worried. I mean, that's a whole other story about Michelle's, but I was worried about her being on her own. But anyway, it was fine because her cousin was there, and we had another friend who lived there for a while as well. But anyway, so yeah, anyway, I'm busy, doing all my admin. And then, Lawrence then asked me I did have a mobile phone at that point, an ancient one. And then he said, have your phone number. And then we just really hit it off. And then I was like to Michelle, I don't know, I just don't want to go there. And then Michelle was like, listen, don't read anything into it. It's just one extra friend for you. She kind of, talked me down because I was really like, I don't need another man, thank you. Anyway, at this point, and then he said, oh my God, you're not going to believe this. I have to come over to the Manchester office. And I was like, I was a bit freaked out about it. Anyway, Michelle worked at a hotel at the time. So Michelle said, and it wasn't far from the office. So she said, sorry, I'm choking. We'll book him in there. I mean, it's a company trip. But I was like, I don't want him anywhere near my house. I mean, this is like, this is really. So anyway, Michelle said, don't worry, I'll book him in this hotel. And it was a preferred hotel of the company by coincidence. Or not like first choice. They wouldn't have naturally put him in there. And so his trip was arranged. And then, then he was like, well, can, take you for dinner and everything. So I did. And then we, there was a lot of chemistry and a lot of flirting and, a bit of smoochy and, all the rest of it. And that was it, you know. Then it was like full on, you know, full blown romance going on. And all the time I'm getting really stressed about this because, you know, I'm leaving my home country, you know, I'm leaving my mum and Estelle and, you know, and obviously my dad and, you know, and my siblings, but, you know, my mum and dad working together and you know, all my friends and, you know, and even though my job, it was still going to a new office and a new environment and kind of, even though everybody knew me, I was kind of like the new girl again, and you know, it was very stressful. Anyway, now I need a slurp. So it's established. Me and Lawrence are then, you know, a little bit of a new romance, you know, really, you know, all that sort of, you know, giggly phone calls and SMSs and you know, just it was a really nice period. But again, it was very stressful, and then so as I said, I'd already booked before moving. I'd booked to go over. Well, I had to go over to work anyway, and then I had to go and try and, you know, view apartments. Now at that time here in the Netherlands, so this would have been 2001. The housing market was, I've not even hardly done any knitting, I'm going to do knit some now. The housing market was crazy. There wasn't a lot of new houses had been built. If you did want a new house, you had to enter like a lottery system to see if you even was eligible to buy any, never mind the one you wanted. There was no rentals. There was this culture of sub renting. And I had my heart set on living in Amsterdam. You know, that's what I'd moved there for. And I'd been very clear. And, you know, Lawrence said, well, you know, I've got space, why don't you move with me? And I was like, no, this is way too soon. And, you know, I think we made a pact that, you know, we'd date for a year and see how it went. And then we'd talk about, you know, if we were going to, you know, move in together kind of thing. Because I had just turned 30 and he was 40. And, you know, at this point, we'd had some quite in-depth conversations. And, you know, that's a whole other story. But both of us didn't think we'd be easily able to have children. So, you know, yeah, I'm 30 and he's 40. We you know, we weren't pussyfooting around. We were having, you know, is this worth the hassle? You know, so we said, okay, 1 year, we're going to date, you know, I'll have my place, stay with you now and again and vice versa. So anyway, come over. Oh my gosh, I was desperately trying to find places. I didn't even manage to go and view something. It was literally in between me calling an agent and coming over. It had been let. It was really stressful. And then my boss had said, well, you know, we can put you up in a hotel for a few months, you know, don't worry. And then my friend Marjorie, going back to my friend Marjorie, she was really sweet. She was helping me a lot. She lived in this tiny studio apartment in an area called De Pijp. It's near the Albert Kite Market in Amsterdam. And then she was like, I've asked my landlord if we can try and, you know, like short track you in. But I was like, you know, I don't want to live in a bedsit. You know, I've come from owning a beautiful brand new house in England. It's not, you know, it's kind of not what I envisaged. And the stairs are like this, are like ladders. I wasn't being snobby. It was just, you know, I was like, where do I put my stuff? Anyway, that didn't come off. Right. So Lawrence had said, listen, I'm not putting any pressure on you. I'm really worried about you ending up just taking something for the sake of it and ended up in a bit of a dodgy area. And he said, just ship your things to me. I've got room to store it. And then get here, settle in, and then I'm going to take you to view properties. And then at least I know that you're in, you know, somewhere safe. And then we stick with our plan and we do the whole dating for a year. So I was like, you know what? I can do that. Because at this point, you know, I'd been visiting him and, you know, he'd only come over to the UK once. And so I'm literally, you know, everything booked. I had a big leaving due for work, and, you know, it was like everything was happening. And then, you know, I remember sitting on the sofa with Michelle, we were having a glass of wine, you know, just reminiscing and everything. And I'd not had my usual sort of phone call from Lawrence to say night, or, you know, or an SMS or nothing. And then it was like 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. I was starting to get really worried because it was so out of character. Anyway, I think it was about 1 a.m. because even Michelle was like, I'm getting worried. What, can we phone the police or something? Now, at that point, he did have a lodger He was actually a colleague, not in the same department, but worked at the same company. And I knew, I didn't know, I'd met her. I didn't know a bit pre-hand. Anyway, it was about 1 a.m, and she called Michelle's home number. And she was really stressed. She said, Lawrence has had an accident. He had a motorbike at the time, quite a, powerful Kawasaki, big racy thing. She said, the hospital have just phoned me and they said, I have to take some things for him. He's had an accident and he's being operated on. And I was like, oh my God, is he conscious? And she said, he is. I spoke to him very briefly and he said, I have to phone you. She said, what shall I pack for him? I said, I don't know. What, I didn't even, we'd not even been, dating for a couple of months. It was literally, half of that had been like a phone, a friendship thing. So I don't know. I don't even know, so I said, well, just on a practical level, you have to go rooting, give him some clean, underwear and some socks and some t-shirts, and, he's going to have to be comfortable because he's, Anyway, so this went on all through the night. Anyway, this is the weekend that I'm moving over there. Anyway, everything just got canned, and I managed to bring my flight forward. And, I just took off, very, very upset. Got a taxi to Lawrence's house, which was in Harlem. He rented a house, and met our lodger, Marsha, who was still in contact with, there. And then I think that was got there Friday night, and then Saturday, Marsha took me straight to the hospital. She drove Lawrence's car because she didn't have a car at the time. And then I went in and saw him, and we were both very emotional. And what had happened, he'd been out on his bike. He'd gone under he was on the motorway, but he'd gone under he's gone on the off ramp to come off, but the off ramp went under the motorway. There was a lot of condensation under the bridge part of it, and his back wheel was on a curve and took off, and he ended up. I drive past that and now and again, and it just freaks me out. And then he hit the barrier, got thrown off his bike, and then went down the embankment, which was as high as my double-story house. And then and it was really late at night, nobody around, and his leg was broken in 3 places. He'd managed to drag himself. God, the pain he must have been in. Drag himself up, and then as he got to the top, luckily a car had come, followed, on the same off ramp, saw Lawrence's bike lying in the middle of, because it had hit the barrier and ricocheted off, lying in the middle of the motorway exit. If it had been an hour earlier, it caused a major incident because everybody hit it. And then this young couple got out, and then they found him and they called the ambulance and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, his bike was a write-off. So yeah, I ended up, so that was my first weekend living in the Netherlands. And Lawrence had a dog at the time as well, Gustav. And, she was just a lodger, she was helpful. But I just moved in and I just took charge, and, I'd never really driven. No, I'd never driven on the other side of the road in a foreign country. And then I remember the next day tearing a page out of the yellow pages. So I had the address of the hospital. Marcia was couldn't rouse her. She was out in a coma. Just found the car keys and just took off. And I remember I got in there and Lawrence was a bit zonked. He was, was on medication. But I walked in and he was looking behind me, and he's like, how did you get here? And I went, I drove. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, Marsha was fast asleep in bed. And I got fed up of waiting. And I showed him the map of the yellow pages. And he was howling, laughing. I wasn't insured in this car. I don't know how many times I'd hit the curb. After I'd lived there for a while, which I'll get onto, it was like a 10-minute drive from where we lived. But it took me over an hour to get there. I was asking directions. It was how I didn't have an accident. It's quite dangerous, but I was on a mission. Anyway, so Lawrence, I think he was in hospital for around a week or something. And I was back and forth and I'd started my job, but I was really paranoid. I didn't want people thinking I'd moved over there for him when I hadn't. I'd never even heard of him when I made that decision. But I was, the time frame, it was so so close together, and I was really a woman on a mission, and I want this career, and I want to be taken serious, and I mean, it's, looking back, it's so stupid now. But my friend Marjorie knew, obviously, and then HR knew, because I had to give his address temporarily, and because they knew, work had been informed that Lawrence, had had an accident. And I remember Helen, she was called the HR woman. She said, "Oh, we have another colleague who lives there." And then she went, "Huh? Do you know Lawrence?" And I went, "Yes." And I said, "Oh, I'm lodging." And she went, "Oh." And then she looked at me like, but I was so like paranoid about it. Anyway, Lawrence come out of hospital, and just to put some context on it, he had 7 operations over a 2-year period. At one point, they were talking about amputating his leg. It's a miracle that he can walk, never mind play hockey. And it just got to the point where, I'm there already. I was walking the dog, and I was, cooking for us. And then, after, a month of doing this, it was like, okay, this is working. It seems really silly to move out now. But what I hated, we lived in the wrong direction for work. So obviously we both worked at the same place. He travelled a lot, so we weren't always in the office together. And we were always in the wrong direction. So in the morning, rush hour, coming home, rush hour. And at the time, they've built a new motorway in that area now, but at the time there was literally one motorway, that was it. We lived in Harlem, and we worked in Amstelveen, which is where the market is I go to on Friday. And yeah, it was terrible. And I'd left, from like a 15-minute door-to-door commute to sometimes 2 hours if there was a bad accident, and I hated it. And so this was I moved there the very end of September, beginning of October. And then I brought him home for Christmas, so we could officially meet everybody, the family, and everyone liked him and blah blah blah. And I mean, he didn't even have a Christmas tree, decorations, nothing. Talk about a bachelor pad. And it was a horrible house. We both really disliked it. I'll tell you why, maybe another time or later. But I was just really sick of it. And I said, I want my own. I want to be close to it. I want my own car. And then I said, well, I'm going to go shopping for a car. I don't want to drive. He had this little boy racer car. It was awful, full of dog hair. And then we'd seen this really nice, it was a Samyang Korean Jeep, Korean car, I think, Jeep, massive, big 4-seaters, convertible. I fell in love with it, and it was quite spendy. And he said, well, should I just get rid of my little car, and then we get that car? And then, then it's both of our cars, but at least it's a car that you like. And I was like, okay. So we ended up, we bought a car together. And then after Christmas, I was like, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm done with this. I'm going to look for somewhere to live, and I would prefer to buy somewhere. The rent, it's still really expensive, but the rent, it was cheaper to get a mortgage at that point, and you just couldn't get rentals still. So Lawrence said, well, I would like to invest in money, invest in property, rent is dead money. And so we had this whole, discussion, and then he's like, well, let's just, let's do it. Let's look for a house. So yeah, I started the search, spoke to all, my colleagues and friends at this point, and and then I just couldn't get a handle on it, where to live. So I remember I got another map. We did things by maps those days. I remember I put a pin in where the office was, and then I drew like a radius, like a 5 or 10 kilometre radius around it, and then I just looked at houses around there, and literally houses were being sold in a day. It was crazy. And I was looking online, but I didn't know it then, but you should have like hired an estate agent, and even though they're selling houses, they'll also search for other houses for you and work with other estate agents. Macalas are called. I didn't know any of this. Anyway, oh my god, we saw some sights like you can't believe, really, just god awful houses. And I was adamant, I wanted a house and I wanted a garden. I'd moved to the Netherlands, because I was, climbing my ladder kind of thing, so I didn't want to go back. An apartment in Amsterdam would have been one thing, but if I was going to live in the suburbs, I kind of wanted, what I'd left, in terms of lifestyle. So anyway, then, so this was February, and this house that I'm in now, I'd literally just come on the market, and I just caught it. Timing was right. Called the agent. I said, right, I'm coming. Made an appointment. I think it was like a day or two later. We came to view it. I think I've still got photos of it somewhere. I'll have to ask Lawrence if you can find them. And we actually bought our old neighbour who rented an apartment a few doors down from us. JP, really sweet little Indian guy. I'll tell you that story another day, maybe. Just remind me in the comments if you want to hear the story of JP. I'll tell you about that. Anyway, we even brought JP with us to view the house, and we met the owner, and it was just so weird. She'd bought this house from new. I mean, this is from the late 60s. Like in England, they call them like the early wimpy houses, that kind of thing. And so it only had one owner. Her husband had sadly passed away. He'd had terminal cancer, but he'd been sick for a long time, and she was in a new relationship. I'll take these off because I'm clearly not knitting on them. Because I'm looking out the window because I'm digging in my memory and trying to. Gosh, I'm going back way now. Are you impressed with my memory? I can't remember. I go downstairs and forget what I went down for, but I can remember this. And then, so what was it? Yeah, her husband, I think he was in a hospice, and then there was a man there whose wife was also in a similar circumstance, and then sadly their spouses had passed away, and they kept in contact. So the lady who owned this house and this other man, and then they'd been sort of older dating, and they decided, life's too short, and they ended up, they bought a property. Now the property they bought, so I live in Aalsmeer. The property they bought was in, was it Alkmaar? I think it was. So like the two towns beginning with A. Her street name was similar. So for example, say I live on Smith Street, her new house was on Smith Lane, and the number of the house was the same as well. There was just so many. We really connected with her. She was lovely, lovely, lovely. And then it turned out that we kind of knew her niece, randomly, and she just liked us. And I said, I'm looking for a family home. And I think, nowadays, I think you can write these letters, like begging letters of why they should sell you their house, how times have changed. But I think we just connected. Anyway, there was another couple waiting to come in and view. And I said to Lawrence, we just can't wait. So literally, this was in the space of a week. I found it, made the appointment, viewed it, and we put an offer in. And in the Netherlands, gazumping is illegal. So that's where you can go, sneak in, outbid somebody. And because we were the first person to open the negotiation, she had to, by law, either accept the offer or decline it, and then she was free to move on. She couldn't put us in a bidding war with anybody. And she did a counter offer. We accepted it, and then that was it. And then what do you know? That was a big shock, because if you remember earlier, Lawrence and I, we didn't think, we both said we did want children. I'd got to this point. I think when I hit 30, I was like, no, I don't want kids. And then, body clock. And then I was like, I think I might like that, and I can see a future with Lawrence, and, so we weren't exactly being careful. And then what do you know? I was pregnant. That was quite because we'd even spoke about it in our year of dating. We were, I ended up moving in, but anyway, we'd said, time's are ticking, that when we were ready, we were going to give it like a 12-month period or something, and then when we, thinking about it, then we'd probably go and see a fertility doctor, because even if you are lucky enough to, maybe I needed IVF, I don't know, but that whole journey could take years, and maybe nothing succeeds at the end of it. So we'd had that conversation already, but the fact that I was like, I had a bun in the oven when I was, we just agreed to buy a house. So yeah, we were both elated, but it was quite shocking, to say the least. But on a practical level, it's like, hey, but we bought the family house and we have no intention of staying here. But our kids are born here. 23 years later, we're still living here. But that's I think that's about it. It's 45 minutes. I think I'm getting tired now of waffling, but I think that's a good story. That explains how I got here, how I met Lawrence, and then I don't know. Well, let me know if there's another thing you'd like to hear, another topic. I've got a few minds for some chit chats, but let's wrap it up for today, because I still have to upload the video and make a little thumbnail and everything and edit, and yeah. But I hope you enjoyed it. My tea has gone cold, but I like it cold, so I did hardly any knitting. Let me know if you were also doing something crafty. Yeah, what was you doing while I was waffling away? I hope you enjoyed it. Just let me know. Shall we carry on, or is it like, no, I'm kind of not interested in this? Anyway, thanks for listening. Let's do the emoji game. Are you still here? If you're still here, if you can find anything that looks remotely like crafting, like a ball of wool or something, in the emojis, put it in the comments below, or you can write the word knit or knitting, and then it tells me that you're still awake, you made it to the end. Right, thanks for tuning in. Next time I'll be here on YouTube will be the weekly vlog on Sunday, so take care, and don't forget, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, please could you do that, and if you want to hit the bell somewhere on your screen, YouTube will notify you every time I upload a new video. But yeah, hopefully it's a new format, a new little kind of playlist we can add to the channel. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you on Sunday. Bye for now.